If you are 60 or older and you are planning to fly anywhere in the next 12 months, there is a very good chance you are about to leave money, comfort, and convenience on the table without even realizing it. Every single day, thousands of Canadian seniors walk through airport doors and quietly accept long lines, confusing signage, and unnecessary stress, simply because nobody ever told them what they were actually entitled to ask for. Airlines will not announce it over the intercom. Airport staff will not chase you down to offer it, and most travel agents will never mention it unless you bring it up first. Today, that changes. In the next 25 minutes, we are going to walk through 7 practical airport perks and services that are available to travelers over 60, things that can make your next trip smoother, less exhausting, and in some cases, less expensive. And near the end of this video, we are also going to talk about something that matters enormously if you receive old age security or the guaranteed income supplement, and you are thinking about traveling outside of Canada because there are rules tied to those benefits that catch a lot of retirees completely off guard. Before we go any further, if you find value in clear, no-nonsense information made specifically for Canadian seniors and retirees, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. We publish new videos regularly on CPP, OAS, GIS, and everyday retirement topics, and turning on notifications means you will not miss the ones that could genuinely save you time, money, or stress. Now, let us set the stage for why this topic matters so much right now. Air travel has changed dramatically over the last several years. Airports are busier, security lines are longer, and many of the smaller, more personal touches that used to exist have quietly disappeared or become harder to find. At the same time, more Canadians than ever are traveling in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, whether that is to visit grandchildren, escape the winter for a few months, attend a family event, or simply enjoy the retirement they worked their whole lives for. Yet despite this shift, most airports and airlines still expect travelers to already know what services exist and to ask for them proactively. Nothing is handed to you automatically. If you do not ask, in most cases, you simply do not receive it. That is the core problem we are solving today. So here is what we are going to cover. First, we will give you a clear overview of why airport accessibility and senior-friendly services exist in the first place and why so few people actually use them. Second, we will walk through the important facts, the real services that are commonly available across Canadian airports. Third, we will talk about who this really affects, because it is not just about age, it is about mobility, health conditions, and travel circumstances too. Fourth, we will get into the benefits, and yes, some of the potential risks or things to watch out for. Fifth, we will cover timing, requirements, and rules you need to be aware of before you book. Sixth, we will go through the most common mistakes seniors make at the airport, mistakes that are easy to avoid once you know about them. Seventh, we will give you a practical, step-by-step checklist you can actually use before your next flight. And finally, we will wrap up with the key takeaways, including that important piece about OAS and GIS travel rules I mentioned earlier. Let us get started. Let us start with the basics. Canadian airports, like airports around the world, are required to provide certain accessibility accommodations for travelers who need them. This is not a special favor, and it is not charity. It exists because airports and airlines operating in Canada have obligations under accessibility legislation and airline tariffs to accommodate passengers with mobility challenges, disabilities, or conditions that make travel more difficult. Age itself is not automatically a qualifying condition everywhere, but many of the practical realities that come with aging, things like reduced mobility, difficulty standing for long periods, hearing or vision changes, or simply needing a little more time to get through security, absolutely do qualify a traveler for support in most cases. The problem is that these services are largely reactive rather than proactive. In other words, the airport and the airline are generally required to help you if you ask, but they are not necessarily going to walk up to you in the terminal and offer it. This creates a strange gap where the people who most need these services are often the least likely to know they exist, simply because nobody explained it to them clearly. Younger, more tech-savvy travelers tend to research every detail before flying. Many seniors, especially those who do not fly frequently, tend to rely on old assumptions from decades past, when air travel looked very different. Think about it this way. If you flew regularly in the 80s or 90s, your mental model of how airports work is probably outdated. Security screening has changed. Boarding procedures have changed. The way you request assistance has changed. And frankly, some services that did not exist back then are now standard practice, but only if you know to ask. This video exists to close that gap. Now let us get into the actual services. These are the 7 areas we will focus on throughout this video, and while availability can vary slightly by airport and by airline, these are widely recognized categories of support across major Canadian airports. The first is special assistance requests, sometimes referred to as accessibility services or reduced mobility assistance. This is the formal process where you notify your airline in advance that you require support getting through the airport. This can include a wheelchair, an escort through security, help navigating long walks between gates, or assistance boarding and deplaning. Many seniors assume this service is only for people who use a wheelchair full-time. That is not accurate. It is also available for travelers who can walk but struggle with long distances, who have balance concerns, who experience fatigue easily, or who simply want support navigating an unfamiliar or large airport. The second is priority or expedited security screening. While Canada does not have a universal, guaranteed fast-track lane for every senior at every airport, many airports do offer accommodations for travelers who identify themselves as needing extra time or support during screening. This can include a private screening area, someone walking you through the process step by step, or simply being moved to a shorter or more accessible line. Some airports have introduced dedicated lanes for passengers with disabilities or mobility concerns, and if you fall into that category, it is worth asking about at the security checkpoint itself. The third is pre-boarding. Almost every airline operating in Canada allows passengers who need extra time or assistance to board before the general boarding process begins. This means you are not rushing down a jet bridge while people push past you with rolling suitcases. It means you can take your time getting to your seat, storing your carry-on, and getting settled. Many seniors do not realize this is available to them simply because they never identify themselves as needing it, or they feel embarrassed to ask. The fourth is accessible washroom and rest areas throughout the terminal. This sounds small, but for many seniors managing health conditions, knowing where these facilities are located and having staff point you toward them quickly can make a significant difference in comfort during a long layover or a delayed flight. The fifth is baggage assistance. Many airports and airlines offer help with checking bags, retrieving them at baggage claim, and in some cases carrying or transporting them to curbside pickup or ground transportation. This is particularly useful if you are traveling alone or if lifting heavy luggage is physically difficult. The sixth is medical equipment accommodation. If you travel with mobility aids, oxygen equipment, or other medical devices, airlines are generally required to accommodate these items, often at no additional charge and without counting them against your regular baggage allowance. However, and this is important, the specific rules and documentation requirements vary by airline, so this needs to be confirmed directly with your airline before you fly, not assumed. The seventh is communication and companion support. If you are deaf, hard of hearing, have low vision, or have a cognitive condition that makes navigating a busy airport overwhelming, airports and airlines are generally required to provide communication accommodations, and in some cases allow a support person to accompany you through security, even if they are not traveling on your flight, though this varies significantly by airport and requires advance arrangement. There's another important detail many seniors overlook, and it has to do with timing. Every single one of these services works best, and in many cases only works at all, if you request it in advance. We will talk about exactly how far in advance a little later in this video, so keep watching. Let us talk about who this really applies to, because I want to be clear that this is not only for people who use a wheelchair or who have a visible disability. This applies far more broadly than most people assume. If you have any condition that makes standing in long lines physically difficult, this applies to you. If you tire easily or experience fatigue during long walks through a terminal, this applies to you. If you have arthritis, joint pain, or reduced mobility in your hips, knees, or back, this applies to you. If you have vision changes that make reading small airport signage difficult, this applies to you. If you have hearing loss and struggle to hear gate announcements, this applies to you. If you are traveling alone and simply feel anxious or overwhelmed navigating a large, unfamiliar airport, in many cases this still applies to you. It also applies to caregivers. If you are a senior traveling with a spouse or family member who has a more significant mobility or health need, understanding these services helps you support them more effectively and reduces stress for both of you during the trip. I also want to address something directly, because I know some of you are thinking it. Some seniors feel uncomfortable requesting assistance because they do not want to be seen as needing help, or they worry it will slow other people down, or they simply feel that asking is an inconvenience to airport staff. I want to gently push back on that. These services exist specifically because airports and airlines expect a portion of their travelers to need them. Requesting assistance is not an imposition. It is using a system that was built, in part, for exactly this purpose. There is no reason to feel embarrassed about making your travel experience safer and more comfortable. Let us talk honestly about the benefits and also about a few things you should watch out for, because I do not want to oversell this. The benefits are significant. Reduced physical strain during travel, particularly around long walks, standing in lines, and navigating security. Lower stress, especially for anxious or first-time travelers. More predictable timing, since pre-boarding and assistance services often mean less rushing and less risk of missing tight connections. better safety, particularly for travelers with balance issues or those using mobility aids in crowded, fast-moving environments. And in some cases, genuine cost savings, particularly around baggage allowances for medical equipment, which we will touch on again shortly. But that's only part of the story. There are also a few things you need to watch out for. First, availability is not guaranteed everywhere. Smaller regional airports may have fewer resources than major international hubs like Toronto Pearson, Vancouver International, or Montreal Trudeau. This does not mean the service does not exist, but it does mean you should confirm ahead of time rather than assume every airport offers an identical experience. Second, some services require advance notice, sometimes as much as 48 hours before your flight. If you wait until you arrive at the airport to request certain accommodations, you may still receive help, but it may not be as smooth or as fast as if you had arranged it in advance. Third, and this is a subtle but important point, requesting assistance through your airline does not automatically transfer to connecting flights on a different airline. If your itinerary involves more than one airline, you generally need to arrange assistance separately with each carrier. Fourth, be aware that requesting a wheelchair or mobility assistance can sometimes mean you are moved through the airport on a schedule set by ground staff rather than entirely on your own timeline. For most travelers, this is a worthwhile trade-off, but it is worth knowing in advance so it does not catch you by surprise. This section is where precision matters, so let us slow down. If you want to request mobility or accessibility assistance, the general recommendation across Canadian Airlines is to notify them at the time of booking or as early as possible before your flight, ideally at least 48 hours in advance. Some airlines allow shorter notice, and airport staff will generally still try to accommodate last-minute requests, but earlier is always better and gives staff time to properly arrange resources like wheelchairs, escorts, or accessible transportation between terminals. If you are traveling with medical equipment such as a mobility scooter, walker, oxygen concentrator, or CPAP machine, contact your airline directly well in advance to confirm their specific documentation requirements, battery restrictions for powered devices, and any forms that may need to be completed before departure. These rules differ by airline and can also be affected by international regulations if you are flying outside Canada, so do not assume the rules are the same as your last trip, particularly if any time has passed since you last flew. Now here is the part 1 promised you earlier, and it is genuinely important if you receive old age security or the guaranteed income supplement. These two benefits are connected, but they behave very differently when it comes to traveling outside Canada, and misunderstanding this distinction has caused real financial stress for retirees. Old age security, generally speaking, can continue to be paid to eligible Canadians who are outside the country, provided they meet the residency requirements tied to the program. However, the Guaranteed Income Supplement works differently. GIS is intended to support low-income seniors who are living in Canada, and it is generally only payable for a limited period while you are absent from the country, historically discussed as around 6 months, after which payments may stop until you return. I want to be very clear here because this is exactly the kind of detail I do not want to get wrong for you. The specific time limits, exceptions, and rules around GIS eligibility during travel can change, and they depend on your individual circumstances. I am not going to state an exact number of days or weeks as though it is guaranteed to apply to you because your situation may differ and program rules are updated from time to time. What I will tell you, clearly and directly, is this. If you receive GIS and you are planning any extended trip outside Canada, whether that is wintering in the United States, visiting family overseas, or taking a long cruise, you need to contact Service Canada directly before you travel to confirm exactly how your specific benefit will be affected. Do not rely on what a neighbor told you, and do not rely on what worked for you 5 years ago. Rules and personal circumstances can both shift, and the safest path is always a direct conversation with Service Canada or a check of your My Service Canada account before you finalize travel plans. This single step, confirming your benefit status before an extended trip, has the potential to save you from a very unpleasant surprise when a payment does not arrive the way you expected. If you're finding this information helpful, this is a good moment to hit that subscribe button because we cover topics exactly like this regularly, breaking down CPP, OAS, and GIS rules in plain, honest language without the confusing government jargon. Let us go through the mistakes we see most often because avoiding these is often more valuable than knowing the perks themselves. Mistake number 1 is waiting until you arrive at the airport to ask for help. As we discussed, most accommodations work far better when arranged in advance. Showing up and hoping staff will notice you need assistance puts you at the mercy of how busy that particular day happens to be. Mistake number 2 is assuming that because you managed without help on a previous flight, you will not need it this time. Health, mobility, and stamina can change gradually, and many seniors do not fully notice the change until they are standing in a long security line, feeling far more exhausted than they expected. Mistake number 3 is not confirming medical equipment rules directly with the airline before departure. Assuming your walker, scooter, or oxygen equipment will simply be handled the same way it was handled last time can lead to delays, extra fees, or in rare cases, the equipment not being accepted at all without proper documentation. Mistake number 4 is booking extremely tight connection times without accounting for the extra time mobility assistance may require. If you need a wheelchair escort between gates in a large airport, a 35-minute connection may not be realistic, even though it looks fine on paper. Mistake number 5, and this one is significant, is traveling outside Canada for an extended period while receiving GIS without confirming how that absence affects your payments. This is not a minor administrative detail. It can directly affect your income, and it is entirely avoidable with one phone call or one login to your online account before you book your trip. Mistake number 6 is not carrying a simple written list of your medications, medical conditions, and emergency contacts when traveling, particularly for longer trips or trips outside the country. This is not specific to airport perks, but it is closely related to safe, stress-free senior travel, and it takes only a few minutes to prepare. Mistake number 7 is assuming travel insurance from years ago still applies, or assuming your provincial health coverage will cover everything while you are outside Canada. Provincial health plans generally provide limited coverage outside Canada, and many seniors are surprised by just how limited that coverage actually is. Separate travel insurance, reviewed and purchased specifically for your trip, every trip, is something worth taking seriously rather than assuming from memory. Now let us turn this into action. Here is what I would recommend doing before your next flight, in order. Start by booking your flight, and at the same time or shortly after, contacting your airline directly to request any accessibility or mobility assistance you think you might need. Do this even if you are unsure whether you truly need it. It is far easier to cancel a request you did not end up using than to arrange one at the last minute. Next, if you are traveling with any medical equipment, call the airline's accessibility or special services line directly, not just the general booking line, and ask specifically what documentation or advance notice they require for your particular device. Then review your connection times if your trip involves more than one flight. If you anticipate needing mobility assistance, build in extra time between flights rather than booking the tightest possible connection. After that, if you receive the guaranteed income supplement and your trip will take you outside Canada for an extended period, contact Service Canada directly or log into your My Service Canada account and ask specifically how your planned absence may affect your payments. Do this well before your departure date, not the week before you leave. Following that, review your travel insurance separately for this specific trip. Do not assume coverage from a previous year or a previous policy automatically carries over. Confirm what is covered, particularly for pre-existing conditions, since this is an area where many seniors discover gaps only after it is too late. Next, prepare a simple document, whether printed or on your phone, listing your medications, dosages, allergies, relevant medical conditions, and emergency contact information. Keep a copy with you, and consider leaving a copy with a family member as well. Finally, when you arrive at the airport on the day of your flight, do not hesitate to speak directly with airline staff at the check-in counter or gate if you need any additional support that was not arranged in advance. Staff are generally trained to accommodate these requests, and asking is always the right move, even if you feel you are asking for something small. Let us bring this all together. Air travel for Canadian seniors does not have to be stressful, exhausting, or confusing, but it does require a small amount of proactive planning that most people simply are not told about. The services we discussed today, special assistance requests, priority or expedited screening where available, pre-boarding, accessible facilities, baggage assistance, medical equipment accommodation, and communication support, exist specifically to make your travel experience safer and more comfortable. But nearly all of them depend on you knowing they exist and asking for them, ideally well in advance of your travel date. Equally important, if you receive the Guaranteed Income Supplement, extended travel outside Canada is not something to plan casually. A quick direct conversation with Service Canada before you book that flight can prevent a financial surprise that would otherwise catch you off guard weeks into your trip. This is not meant to discourage you from traveling. It is meant to help you travel with full clarity so you can genuinely relax and enjoy your trip instead of wondering after the fact whether something was going to go wrong with your benefits back home. If there is one single takeaway I want you to leave with today, it is this. Do not assume. Do not assume the airport will notice you need help. Do not assume your equipment rules are the same as last time. Do not assume your GIS payments will simply continue as normal during a long trip. In every one of these situations, a short phone call or a few minutes of preparation replaces uncertainty with confidence, and that confidence is worth far more than the few minutes it takes to arrange. travel in your 60s, 70s, and beyond can be some of the most rewarding travel of your life. Whether that means visiting grandchildren, escaping a harsh Canadian winter, or finally taking the trip you always said you would take once you retired. You have earned that. The goal of this video was simply to make sure you walk into that airport knowing exactly what is available to you, exactly what to ask for, and exactly what to check before you go, so that the only thing you need to focus on once you are through security is enjoying your trip. If this video gave you information you did not have before today, please consider subscribing to this channel. We publish regular, straightforward content built specifically for Canadian seniors and retirees, covering CPP, OAS, GIS, and the everyday practical topics that genuinely affect your finances and your quality of life. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it useful, leave a comment letting us know which of these 7 perks surprised you the most, and share it with a friend or family member who might be planning a trip soon. Thank you so much for watching, travel safely, and we will see you in the next video.